Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're jumping right into how our source material totally reframes a concept we all know well. So often rules or commandments get a bad rap as these heavy, restrictive limitations, but the text flips that completely on its head. What if God's rules are actually more like a beautiful, protective garden? Let's unpack how this metaphor redefines obedience and personal growth, especially when it comes to kids. So let's start with a really foundational question the material poses. What actually keeps us safe and happy in life? Think about it in terms of a child growing up. As they navigate the world, they absolutely need the freedom to explore, right? But they also desperately need security from harm. The text really zeroes in on where we can find that perfect sweet spot between true safety and genuine joy. To answer that, the source uses this incredibly vivid gardening metaphor. Just like a master gardener carefully protects their most precious plants from the elements, the text describes God as ruling his kingdom with absolute diligence, actually building a protective hedge around us. And here's the kicker. According to the source, this isn't about isolating us at all. The goal is literally to create a safe space for us to flourish. Now, take a look at how it defines this hedge. The source identifies the hedge as the Ten Commandments. So rather than looking at them as just a strict, boring list of don'ts, the text argues they're designed specifically to preserve us from the natural results of transgression. It basically frames the commandments as this wonderful enclosure of safety. It sets up a fascinating contrast between two totally different realities. On the outside of the hedge, the text warns that stepping beyond those laws brings all the dangers and results of transgression. But on the inside, that's where you find health, happiness, peace, and joy. This whole framework suggests that finding security within these boundaries is literally the prerequisite for a child's true happiness. Moving right along to our first section, becoming like Jesus, striving in word, life, and character. The text really grounds this whole growth process in Psalm 40, verse 8, which says, "I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart." The big takeaway here is that true alignment happens when the law stops being just some external rulebook and transforms into an internal delight. So, how does that transformation actually happen, especially for a young person? Well, the source gives us three super practical steps. First, contemplate the Redeemer. Second, by beholding, become changed into his image. And third, pray for the same disposition and mind. The whole idea is that simply by studying this incredible example, a child naturally absorbs and reflects that exact same character. It's like a mirror. And the text makes a brilliant distinction in how we measure this change. It notes that Christ became poor so we could become rich. But we're not talking about being rich in physical endowments, the things you're just handed at birth. Nope, the focus is entirely on attainments. The source defines these as the deep, meaningful character traits we actively develop through dedication and grace. Which brings us to section 2, planting truth inside, growing the fruits of the Spirit. In this amazing framework, the Holy Spirit acts as the ultimate master gardener. The text tells us that the Spirit literally plants truth straight into the heart of the seeker the moment they open their minds to the Word. So it's not a passive thing. It is a very active, ongoing process of cultivation inside that protective hedge. And the harvest? It's beautiful. It includes elements the text affectionately calls heavenly mansions: love, pity, tenderness, courtesy, and Christian politeness. According to the source, when a child focuses on Jesus, they just naturally start to bloom in these areas. These aren't forced robotic behaviors. They are the organic, natural fruit of a kid resting safely within God's garden. Section 3 now. Being a good steward, taking care of God's gifts. The source defines a steward of the grace of Christ as someone whose inner truth is proven by the work they do for God's kingdom. What I love about this is that it frames children not just as passive little sponges, but as active, vital stewards who've been entrusted with incredibly valuable gifts to advance this work. They get to participate. And that leads us to section 4, using your talents, accumulating glory for God. The source specifically highlights these wonderful, everyday gifts over what we might traditionally call talents. It lists speech, the words you say; memory, what you retain and share; influence, how you affect the people around you; and property, the things you actually own. The text points out that kids can be incredibly effective stewards right here. They can use their speech to encourage a buddy, or their memory to recall and share foundational truths. It's everyday magic. The text offers a rock-solid guarantee to these stewards. God will absolutely bless the right use of these gifts to advance his kingdom.
The whole premise is that when you or a child make a steadfast determination to use your everyday influence and words correctly, God takes those efforts and just multiplies them.
So, as we wrap up this explainer and step out of the garden metaphor for a second, the text leaves us with a real practical challenge. Which of your talents are you going to use for God's kingdom today? Whether it's your speech, your memory, or your daily influence, how will you take all that beautiful character you've grown safely inside the hedge and share it with the world outside?